way of introduction, this is the Notre Dame Club of Pittsburgh. And going around with the officers, we've got Carrie Boehner, who's our president, on the call. Marilee Williams, president-elect, on the call. Maureen Doyle, our treasurer, and I am your host, Dan Yu. And we'd like to welcome Patrick Creadon to the call. He's a director, writer, producer, cinematographer, actor, class of '89. He does have a very interesting, very short acting experience when he did star across from Anthony Michael Hall in a film. He's a Chicago native, and he started in documentaries. Is that right? Documentary shooting in the '90s at PBS. Right. I think he's probably more famous amongst Notre Dame people for the 30 for 30 Catholics for Convicts. And he's got a bunch of other credits. And you live in LA, is that correct?
Right. I'm in Los Angeles, Los Feliz neighborhood.
Got it. All right. So this meeting is being recorded. Can everybody see this fairly clearly, the presentation?
Yep. Good job.
Okay.
Yeah. Although there's a little note about Chrome OS at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
Now it's
gotcha. There you go. Okay. Please keep yourself muted when not talking. We'll be using the chat feature for Q&A and general comments. Carrie will be monitoring all the questions and the comments, and it will be provided to me or to directly to Patrick during the session. We're going to use Poll Everywhere for a word cloud, and hopefully this will be a fun thing for us. You can open up another browser and go to pollev/danu400 or text danu400 to 22333. And I'm going to activate that now, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well. So if you go to the URL, okay, and you should have this.
Yeah, but show it again. That would be a good idea.
Yep, in a second. So go ahead and answer the question. This is just to test it out.
Good job, Dan.
Sure.
It works.
It works. Great. I'm going to share to the screen again. So we've got PA. You can answer that question just to make sure that we're getting responses. Virginia. Is anybody having any problems with the Poll Everywhere?
Yeah, what was the, what do you text to 22333 again?
Sorry, we'll go back to that. It's DanU400.
Okay.
So DanU400 to 22333.
Once more.
Once more, sure, no problem.
Dan, can you just put that up on the screen again? Can you share your screen and put it up?
Oh, is my screen not being shown? Oh, I'll get to there right now. I thought I did that.
Yeah,
my
that's
apologies.
what you're saying.
How's that? Sorry about that. Everyone see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Great.
Oh, can you put it back on?
Oh, I'm too fast with my clicking around here. So either one should work.
Two, 22333.
Yep.
Okay.
We should bring up an application. There we go. Perfect. Washington, California. Excellent. We've got Jersey, Missouri.
Very nice.
Excellent. Colorado. All right. Looking good. Okay. All right. So this is a Notre Dame event. So usually Notre Dame events we kick it off with an invocation. So I guess I'll just kick it off. Heavenly Father, we're thankful that everyone here in this meeting is healthy enough to join us. We pray for those that are sick and for those that continue to be oppressed and disenfranchised. We're thankful for today and pray for the health of the students, staff, and alumni, and the families of the people in this call. Ever mindful of those less fortunate. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. So, Patrick, I remember when I first saw this movie, I was really hoping that I would get to learn a lot, and I did, about Father Hesburgh. But maybe from your perspective, I guess if you could describe, who is Father Hesburgh in quick terms.
Well, I think for people in the Notre Dame community, we all know a little bit about him. There's certain things that you kind of learn when you're around campus, and the library is named after him, and he was an influential person. And then his story kind of, I think, drops off a cliff after those first few things. 150 honorary degrees and 16 presidential commissions, and then it just falls off. And I just had a feeling that there was a great story there. And my only concern was that when we dove into the research of his story and started to tell it, that the real story wouldn't really live up to his reputation, or wouldn't live up to, just the legend that was built up around him. And I honestly think it was kind of the opposite. I had no idea really how influential he was on a grand scale, but also he was just a kind and decent person. We just didn't find things that went against kind of what you thought going into it. And I to be frank, that was another concern, is what are we going to do if he turns out not to be the person that we thought he was? And I would say it really was kind of the opposite experience. I have a much greater admiration for who he was and what he stood for, and what he did on a grand scale, and what he did on a small scale as well. He was kind of good at the top and also good at the bottom, and good everywhere in between. He just was a decent man and a strong leader, and we had a great time making the film.
So now, was it important, right, to depict all that? I mean, and I guess another way to ask this is, how did you get involved, right? Like, why would you want to make a movie about a priest? Right?
So I've always felt that I do my best work, and my wife and I do our best work when we do stuff that feels personal to us, that we have a close connection to in one way or another. And in fact, the first movie that she and I ever made was a movie called Wordplay, which was about the New York Times crossword puzzle. That came out in 2006. It was a runaway hit. People were like, who are these guys? Where did this story come from? Where did these filmmakers come from? And the story behind it is a pretty simple one. Christine and I had been working for over a decade in the film business. We had never made our own movie. We were hungry to do something that seemed fun and interesting and that was close to our heart. And we discovered on our honeymoon, this is slightly embarrassing, but we discovered on our honeymoon we discovered the New York Times crossword puzzle. Neither one of us had ever really done it before, but we had 2 weeks on a beach in Hawaii, and that's one of the things we did, laying on the beach in the sun. And, 5 years later, when it came time to really come up with something that we thought a story that we could tell well, we called up Will Shortz at the New York Times, asked him if he wanted to be the subject of a documentary. He said yes. A year later, we were at the Sundance Film Festival.
Wow.
We had a real hit on our hands. That year there were about 900 documentaries that were submitted to Sundance, and they only took 16 of them, and Wordplay was one of them. And then at the festival itself, we were the only film that sold at the festival.
Wow.
There were sales that happened afterwards. We were a breakout hit. So the reason I'm telling you that is we've also done films, projects have come to us, and we've made movies that were not as personal. And yes, we try as hard as we can, and we always try to do good, solid work, but it's different. When you make a movie, it's a lot of work, and it takes a year or two to do it. And it hopefully, it's a story that you feel connected to. And so Hesburgh happened because in 2015, my father died. He was class of 60, biggest Notre Dame football fan I ever knew. He went to like 380 games. He was kind of crazy about Notre Dame football. And he died in 2015. And 10 weeks to the day after he died, I got an email from ESPN. And they said, we are thinking about doing a movie about the Notre Dame-Miami rivalry. And we did our research and we found out that you went to Notre Dame. Do you know anything about that story? And I was like, yeah, I know a lot about it. My roommate printed those shirts up.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Rice was my next door neighbor. That was my senior year in college. The leprechaun, Ray Lopez, was one of my best friends. I mean, it kind of went on and on. And so that was another one of those stories that felt very personal. I not only directed that film, I also narrated it. There's a scene in the movie where Lou Holtz is typing a letter to the players. Those hands are my hands. That's a little behind the scenes tidbit that most people don't know. So that movie, again, was very personal, and I think we did solid work there. And while we were making that film, again, we were making it the year Father Ted died. And he had died in like February, I think, of 2015, not long before my dad died. And I was talking to Pat Eilers, and he said, Creeds, what are you guys going to do after the 30 for 30? And I said, honestly, I don't know, but I think there's a great story with Father Ted. And Pat just thinks about it for a minute and goes, done. I'm like,
That's
what does
great.
that mean? What's done? He said, let's do it. Let's go out and try to raise that money and you make the film. And I said, I'd love to do it, but I have two rules or two parameters, let's call them. Number one is we can't take any money from the school. And that would completely deflate any sort of objectivity. If the film was paid for by Notre Dame, not that they would have done that, but I just said we cannot accept any money from the school because that's a conflict of interest. And secondly, I have final say. I have the final cut of the film. And he said, that's fine. That makes perfect sense. I wouldn't expect anything else. So that's how Hesburgh came to be. And in the final analysis, I think there were 20 Notre Dame students and alumni who worked on that film, including myself. So it was a real kind of Notre Dame effort. But, when the movie came out, it didn't feel like an inside job because it wasn't. I mean, it really wasn't. It wasn't a puff piece. It wasn't a vanity piece. The movie was extremely well reviewed by places like the New York Times and Entertainment Weekly. So it was received the way we hoped it would be received, which is, as an independent documentary film, which is what it was. I have a close connection to it, but I didn't want to, I don't know, I didn't want to gloss over stuff or do something that made it feel soft. And I think that's important for what we do. Otherwise, if we had done that, I don't think many people would have bothered to even go see it.
Got it. That makes sense. That totally makes sense. And, one of the, I guess one of the questions that we've got from the audience. Here's one from Maureen. What was the most surprising thing that you learned while researching the film?
He loved cigars, I'll tell you that. He smoked a lot of cigars, and he loved Manhattans. He wasn't a big drinker, but that was his favorite drink. He would have like one Manhattan at the end of a long day. Murph, the bartender at the Morris Inn, who's still there, who's still working, and he became very close to Father Ted. They actually became very good friends. Well, here's something that I hadn't thought of this until just now, but one of the things that was surprising to me was how incredibly influential he was on a national and international level. And the fact that he was a Catholic priest was a positive, or frankly, I think it was a non-factor. That's pretty surprising today. If you look at people in the public arena today, and I'm just being honest, and this is just my own opinion, I think a lot of religious leaders on the national stage are probably more polarizing than uniting. And again, there's a lot of different examples of that, but and of course that's probably a reflection on the time we live in as well. But the fact that Father Ted was a Catholic priest, I'm not kidding. I think that quality of his, or that characteristic of his, evaporated 5 minutes into the meeting.
Right.
And that's different than I think where we live today. I don't know if it's better or worse. I'm just saying that it was a very different time.
Yeah.
I think the other thing really quickly that I didn't know until we interviewed him, but we interviewed Newt Minow, who was the first Jewish board member of the University of Notre Dame, and he and Father Ted were really close. Newt Minow nominated Father Ted to run for president in 1972. Now, there had been lots of talk of him running as vice president at that time, but Newt Minow actually at the Democratic National Convention, Ted was nominated. There were many people nominated, but Ted was one of them to run as president on the Democratic ticket.
Right.
So, it's hard to believe. He almost had like this Forrest Gump quality to him where he like showed up everywhere. But unlike Forrest Gump, he was not a minor character in history. He was a major, massive character. The only person I think in American history that kind of closely resembles him, I mean, they're very different people, but Alexander Hamilton he wore so many hats in his 47 years of life or 49 years of life. They're not sure what year he was born in. But Ted had that same ability to do lots of things really well.
Gotcha. So given everything that's going on today, right, with racial tensions and you touched on the polarizing nature of discussion, we have a question from Phil. With the whole cancel culture, is it? Have you seen it? Have you seen it impact the entertainment industry? Number one, and is that potentially impacting what you may decide to cover or make a film out of?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question as far as the cancel culture part of that goes.
Okay, Phil Irvine, you want to ask
Yeah,
the question?
Yeah, so I'll give some more context. So I work in marketing and we support Fox, and so just within the team that I work with and some of my peers, I think what you're hearing with a lot of comedians and others in the entertainment industry is that they're actually becoming hesitant because of some of the risk of saying something that might not be politically correct and being so by cancel culture, just the trend on Twitter where people may have a differing opinion of something that goes public, and then the whole public may just dismiss future content or the platforms that people have. And I guess I was curious with you in the documentary and movie industry, if that's something that you guys think about or something that's changed your approach to projects that you're planning to take on.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Thank you for fleshing that out a little further. Well, there's a couple things that come to mind. Number one is we are in a unique moment right now in American history. And I definitely, I'm looking at the clock and I know we're probably halfway through this gathering. I definitely hope that Reggie Brooks can shine some of his light and his wisdom on this conversation, because I spoke to Reggie a few weeks ago about the current conversation in our country about racial inequities, and I learned a lot. So I'd like to turn the mic over to Reggie in a moment, but with your question in regards to cancel culture and treading lightly on sensitive issues, Father Ted spent every day of his life dealing with sensitive issues. There's not a day in his life where something personal, sensitive, emotional, private, etc., didn't cross his desk, okay? And he dealt with all of those things with kindness, and he listened a lot. He was a good listener, and he was wise. He was a wise man. I think we need all three of those things in this moment right now, desperately. I get very emotional thinking about it because we're losing the ability to talk to each other. We're losing the ability to get to know each other, to celebrate our differences. And so with that, I do kind of want to ask Reggie to chime in, because I think that Reggie's he's a great Notre Dame man, and he knew Father Ted well, much better than I ever did. I actually never met Father Ted. I saw him on campus one day. My roommate turned to me and said, "Who's that guy?" I'm like, really? He was kidding, but still. So Reggie, what are your thoughts about the very delicate and sensitive conversations that we're having right now? And if I can ask you, part two of that question is, I feel like Father Ted and his colleagues on the Civil Rights Commission kind of set the table for this dinner, for this meal that we're having right now, so to speak. And there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm not quite sure what that conversation and what that work looks like. So I'm going to shut up for a second, and Reggie, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks, Dan and Carrie and Notre Dame Club of Pittsburgh for inviting me to be a part of this. I've had the pleasure of meeting Father Ted on multiple occasions and multiple settings. And the one thing that always stood out to me was the level of compassion that he had and his ability to connect with people. And it was not about, it was never about him. And, I remember coming, when we came back to Notre Dame, I started working in Notre Dame. I'm walking around. First thing, my wife and I met at Notre Dame. The first thing we do is go down to the grotto, light a candle, being back. And, we're walking back to our car. Again, if you walk in, it's a pedestrian campus. So we parked off campus, I parked over by the bookstore and walked over to the grotto. And we're walking back and we see Father Ted by the log cabin. And we're like, excuse my language, but it's like, holy shit, that's Father Ted. And you got to understand, because he was like just there walking around, no security. I'm like, is he allowed to do that? Because he's Father Ted. I mean, you hear stories about him, and I had the pleasure of hearing stories firsthand from a lot of the student athletes that he engaged with. He had a great relationship with Tommy Hawkins, who was an All-American basketball player, the first African-American football player, Wayne Edmonds. They would tell me stories about how he treated them. And I had the opportunity to talk to him about a few things regarding one. He actually talked to me about the Civil Rights Commission and some of the things that took place in the conversations. And I'm like, and they're like, is this top secret or something? Are you allowed to say this? But it was just, he never saw himself as this bigger than life figure. He was a human being. And I think that's at the very essence of the situation and the unrest that we're in, especially from a social justice standpoint,
right.
It's uncomfortable. But the problem is no one wants to be uncomfortable. And I see, Andre, and again, the athletes that are on this call, you were uncomfortable at one time. When whatever sport you played, there was a level of discomfort that you had to go through to become who you were and to become the best. But you had to practice it. It had to be consistent. And that's the problem with, racial inequity, is that we don't want to have the conversations on a continual basis because it's just too uncomfortable. We have to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that's what Father Ted was. He was comfortable with having these difficult conversations and just like, we're going to push through this, not because I'm this person or that person. We're going to move through this because we have a relationship. He was very big on building relationships with people. And then from those relationships, you can move past that discomfort. I had played for one of the, just got some horrible news, and that's kind of why I went off. Coach Holtz's wife passed away, Beth Holtz. And it, again, and Coach Holtz, he was a butthole to a lot of people, but he cared about people. And his wife cared about people. When I was just telling the story today about how we were in their home and having a barbecue, and this guy had white carpet, and I'm like, terrified. The whole team was there about spilling something on the carpet, and I see Mr. Chico here, Linda, people that care about you. That's why you have to push through. Unless we're willing to be uncomfortable, and I'm just gonna say, as a Black man, we grow up in discomfort. And this is where I said, it doesn't have to mean that because there's systemic racism that is saying you as a white person are racist. No, it's saying there's a system in place that has been built and developed that oppresses one group over another. And for us to get through this, we, not just Black people, not this person, but we have to see each other as people, human beings, and say, hey, I'm a part of this community. And we have to work together and say, this is not right. And I put out a video about my experience. I'd gone through a situation in high school where, the police were talking about taking me off in the woods and getting rid of me. And, and it was not until they recognized my name about me going, having signed to go to Notre Dame that conversation changed. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a very segregated city, and people are starting to hear about the 1921 massacre of Black Wall Street. I grew up in the background of that. And it's in these times when we have these conversations, it's getting to the root of it. And then when you, like I said, until you walk a mile in someone else's shoes, and again, my Coach Holtz is a huge Trump supporter. I'm not. But I still love that man. His political affiliations does not trump our relationship that we built over the 4 years that I was at Notre Dame. And then to this day, I speak to Coach Holtz at least 4 or 5 times a year just to check on him and his wife. And he will do anything for me. So it has nothing to do with the color of our skin. It has to do with building relationship with individuals. And until we can get to that point, I was on a Zoom call with about 60 former guys that played for Coach Holtz. And you had a lot of Black guys talking about the experiences that they had growing up that a lot of our white teammates had no concept of. This was the first time we were sharing this. But when you allow yourself to become vulnerable and share your story, it allows people to see the humanity, not only in you, but in themselves. Because when you have a relationship with someone, and that's where everything started with Father Ted and with the Civil Rights Commission, he developed a relationship first, then addressed those hard topics, those difficult issues. But if you don't have a relationship with someone, it's easy to discount them as not being human. But when you know someone, when you bled and sweat with someone, it allows you to have a level of empathy for that person because you know them. I had several former teammates reach back out to me and thank me for sharing my story. And then they told their children. So how we move through this is based on how we develop our relationship. Now, Bill was talking about the cancel culture. Well, do we have to cancel each other? Or can we change that culture to be a human culture, a culture of humanity? We dictate that. We allowed, social media, yeah, it's the land, but it's going to require all of us to get out of our own way, get out of ourselves. And that's what was difficult for me to, like I said, deal with my hurt and pain and share that with other people. But in that, I got to keep talking about it. I got to keep sharing. But it's also opportunities for us to, particularly white people, to not see this as a Black issue or a white issue. This is a human issue. We have to look at this as a human issue and come at it with empathy and love to say, okay, I may not know your experience, but I know you're hurting. I know your pain because you shared it with me. And I'm going to share your pain, but also share the burden of changing what has been established over millennia, over hundreds of years. And the only way to change it is to go to the root of it. And the root is uncomfortable because it shines a light on the imperfections of mankind. But in that imperfection, God is made perfect. And when you're willing to accept your faults and accept your shortcomings, then you can take it to the next level and make significant change. Not superficial change, not for a day. But you hear about, show a man, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Show a man how to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. We got to start showing each other how to fish. Not here's a little something to tide you over. We have to break the system down at its core, at its roots, and uproot it. And a lot of that is to educating our young men and women and our young children at an early age to say, hey, we're going to teach all of American history, not just one perspective of it. And when we do that, when we educate each other in our experiences and share ourselves with others, then we're allowed to open up and build community for all of us, not just a segment.
Thank you, Reggie. That was really powerful. Thank you. If anybody is interested, on the nd.edu site, actually, there's a diversity page, and they shared Reggie's very, very harrowing experience, right? Your video, I think it's like 10 and a half minutes there. I encourage everybody to watch it. It is frightening, to say the least. Right, Reggie? I mean, it's on the page there still, I believe.
Yeah, it was sent out to our monogram winners.
Okay.
It was a story I hadn't shared.
Yeah.
I didn't thought to share it, and then when I heard the stories of several other players that played for Coach Holtz, I mean, there was one guy,
Obviously, his leadership in with the Civil Rights Commission. So he was just a member of the Civil Rights Commission, and then he came to lead it. I'd like to take a question from the audience on this one, since this was one of the things that I knew about it, but I mean, it was definitely not taught to me. Patrick, we have Andre. He wanted to ask, how do you see this film as a conduit to having more conversations around this? Maybe at the club level. I think there would be interest from other clubs for this.
Well,
yeah. So I guess my question was, as a diversity council regional director, right? It's my job to kind of engage clubs both on the diversity level, but especially now at a time like this, is how do I get clubs that typically haven't paid attention to diversity and that now have to tackle sort of a race component in today's society? How do you see this film as an opening or a conduit, if you will, to having those sort of tough conversations at the club level? I've already got things in my mind about maybe having a showing at the club level and then starting it off with a discussion similar to this at those levels for the clubs that are having a tough time engaging in sort of a race opening conversation.
Well, I mean, I think what I like about documentary films in general is you learn stuff, okay, and you learn about individuals and you learn about their world and the work that they did, and that's obviously true with the story of Father Ted. I think it is valuable for people to have an understanding of what the Civil Rights Commission was, how it came to be, what their goals were when that became a law in 1964, and kind of what the fallout from that is and should be. And that's what we're talking about right now in the country, is what does moving forward look like? And I don't really have an answer to that question, but I would echo something that Reggie said to me when we spoke last time, is this is a time to talk about things that we haven't really talked about before, or we haven't been comfortable talking about. I think this is a time for people like myself, people who are white, who have not experienced life as an outsider, let's say, or someone who's been oppressed, and just to listen And I think it's an opportunity for Blacks in our society and anyone in our society who has felt depression at any level to do a lot of the talking and to point towards what a better tomorrow looks like. I know that sounds hokey or, lofty or whatever. I don't mean for it to seem insincere. I just, I don't think there's any sense in breaking out into, smaller groups and problem solving if we're not even really sure what the problem even is or what an improvement looks like in our day-to-day life. So it's complicated, but I think it's great to know where we've been, when we start to figure out where we want to head toward. And I think the movie does a good job of that when it comes to civil rights and just trying to make the world a better place. So I don't know, maybe that might be a disappointing answer, but I think that more than anything, there are people in our society who don't have the same opportunities that the rest of us do. And I think creating more equal opportunity is a great place to start. And that looks like many different things. That takes a million different shapes. But creating opportunity for people where there wasn't any before, or there was little before, is something, I think that's something we should all be asking ourselves right now and trying to figure out what we can do to make our society a more fair and just place.
We have a question from the audience. Well, actually, it's going to be a personal story from Maria from Florida. Maria, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Where's Maria? Are you talking now?
Yes, I'm here. I'm on my iPad. So.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so yeah, I graduated from Notre Dame back in 1994, and I came to the U.S. from a communist country. I came from Hungary, and I know Dan well, and I know Gia on the call as well. And although Linda DeCicco doesn't know me, I know Coach DeCicco was the one who recruited me to Notre Dame back then. And I came here with nothing. I didn't know anything about the school. I didn't know much about Catholicism, although my family kind of hid their religion. In a communist country, they had to do that. And when I was going to Notre Dame, Coach DeCicco told me, you have to sit down and meet with Father Hesburgh. And I told him, I'm afraid. I'm a nobody. Why would I go and meet with him? He's never going to meet me. And he said, look, if he is a great person, you would like to stay in the United States, and he is very influential, and he would listen to you. He would listen to your story. So I did go and meet with Father Hesburgh in the Hesburgh Library. I never forget, he showed me around, he showed me the university, how proud he was of building the university and building on the diversity of the university. He asked me if I was Catholic, which was a very unusual question coming from a communist country. I was not very clear about my own religion. I didn't know if it's something I can talk about. And talking, it goes back to the questions what Reggie had mentioned, talking about the uncomfortable and being genuine about it and connecting to people and being able to connect with anyone. So we had a great conversation about religion, about beliefs, about the diversity, about uncomfortable questions, and became very, very good friends. It's ended up that Father Hesburgh actually wrote a letter to the INS and helped me to stay in this country. He helped me to become a citizen. In 3 months, I got my green card, and we stayed friends. And in 2000, actually, I'm just reading his letter, when he wrote me that, Dear Maria, I'm deeply grateful to you for your thoughtful and generous note regarding my receiving the Congressional Gold Medal. It was a marvelous day. I feel like all my good friends like yourself were participating in it. Many thanks again, Father Hesburgh, July 24, 2000. He handwritten the letter. He dedicated his book to me. And we always stayed in touch. I always give an update of what's going on with my life. He always took the time to write back. And he literally changed my life. It's became such a big impact on my life that now my son actually goes to Notre Dame, and actually he is in the fencing team as well as I started, and he's fencing with Gia, and I'm happy to say there are a lot of good people out there, and Gia is one of them who is continuing that tradition of caring for these students, caring for others, being very inclusive and very equitable to all. So I just wanted to share it with everybody.
Oh, thank you very much. Wow.
So student athletes probably know this, but maybe some of you don't. But Father Hesburgh and Father Ted Joyce, along with Coach Mike DeChico, Linda's dad, they were the team that invented academic advisory for student athletes. And it was in 1964 when they were thinking, we really should make sure that these student athletes graduate, not just get, 4 years of football in. And so they created a framework and invented it. So that's one of the things that I think is a legacy that extends to all of college athletics that I don't think anybody really knows outside of a few people at Notre Dame athletics. Patrick, I know you've got a hard stop right around 8. Is that correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have something coming up right after this.
Sure. Okay, and so we can keep this call going, as when you roll off. So I guess, Patrick, when you're making the movie, right, and then you're working on releasing it, and were there any connections that really stuck with you? Like, there's the interview with like Ted Koppel and some of these board of directors. Were there any kind of global figures that you met or you researched that really kind of stuck with you after?
Well, it's funny. Nancy Pelosi is someone we interviewed for the film. And she was, how would I describe it? She was like nervous about talking about Father Ted. She held him in such high regard. In fact, we sat her down. There, literally standing outside her door was Cory Booker waiting to get in to meet with her, but she was dealing with us. And she's like, just tell Cory to come back. This is very important. So tell him I'll be, he can come back later. She sat down to do her interview. She was in her office in the Congress building, the U.S. Capitol building. And she's like, oh my God, wait, we can't start yet. And she gets up and she kind of runs into the other room, and she comes back with this giant sculpture of the Madonna holding the child that Ted had given her. And she's like, this has to be in the shot. Where can I put this so it'll be in the background? And she's like, can I get a table? I mean, it was like heavy. It was a heavy sculpture. And she like puts it down. She's like, can you see it? Okay, great. And it was like she was all flustered, talking about Father Ted, because she was raised Catholic. She was getting into politics at a time when he was at the highest level of federal politics and fighting for social justice, and he was a Catholic priest. She met with him on many, many, many occasions. And it just goes to show you that you have people like Speaker Pelosi, and you have people like John Boehner, I think, was pretty close with him, I believe. And those two have very little in common, and yet they both look to Father Ted as a uniter. And I just think that's, to answer your question, no matter who we spoke to across the whole spectrum of interview subject, there were about 50 people we interviewed. Leon Panetta, former Secretary of Defense, former White House Chief of Staff, he was another person they called the next day. He said, Secretary Panetta is available at any time that you are. Whenever you want to come, he will make time to do this because Father Ted is one of his heroes. So we got that across the entire political spectrum, across the entire sort of social spectrum, the media spectrum, if you will. And again, I think it goes back to what Reggie said and to what has been mentioned before by many of us on this call, is that he just had a kindness and decency to him. He was a good listener. He was smart. He was selfless. And that's just, those are qualities that we just need a lot of. We need a lot more of that these days, wherever we can get it, frankly. So that was sort of, it was fun to meet some of the sort of famous people that knew him, but it was also kind of cool to meet the people who were not that famous. One of my favorite interviews in the film is with his driver, Marty Ogren. You know, Marty drove for Father Ted for like 40 years, and they were just good pals. They just had a great time together. And that interview is every bit as interesting to me as any of the other ones that we did, because he knew Father Ted so well. He was so close to him.
That's great. All right, so we're on the top of the hour. I want to thank Patrick for
Thank you guys.
But now, before you go, I want to make sure that we do a proper plug here. So obviously, you can find out more about the movie at hesburghfilm.com. And by the way, we don't have to end this call. I think Patrick just has to roll off, but everybody can stick around. We can continue this discussion. And so I want to just share with you one thing here. And give me a second here. All right. So this is just a quote. Do you see the quote?
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody see this? Be the kind of person who not only understands the injustices of this life, but is also willing to do something about them. And so that was a quote that I found was really indicative of what we're doing here and on this call, becoming more aware. And a plug for more resources, obviously blacklivesmatter.com and the bipocproject.org. And then one thing that's I think near and dear to Father Hesburgh, the Andean Health and Development. Patrick, if you want to just talk about that real quick.
Yeah, they were our nonprofit partners on the film, and so if the movie ends up making any money, which it hasn't yet, but if it ever does, all of the profits for the film are going toward the Andean Health and Development Group. It was founded by David Gauss, who was, I want to say, class of 81 or maybe 83. He was a few years before me. And he founded healthcare. Well, basically, he built a healthcare system in Ecuador. And one of their initiatives is something called the Hesburgh Hospital. They named it after Father Ted. And they're just a great group. So
Gotcha.
I encourage you to find out more about them and support them if you can.
Here's the URL again, andeanhealth.org. So Patrick, I just want to give you the heads up. The Notre Dame Club of Pittsburgh will be matching, I think, Carrie, $200. Is that right? We'll match up to $200.
Yeah, we're definitely raising funds for it.
Terrific.
So
Let them know.
Yeah, and so we'll match up to $200 of donations from the attendees on this call, and we'll also put out an email for that.
Thank you, guys. That's Laura and David will be really thrilled about that. I really appreciate that. And last thing I'll say, we'll do something really quickly. I mean, I have a few minutes, but does anyone? I have a couple of extra posters here. Okay. I have a Hesburgh poster, which I don't think I have one framed, but they're really cool. It's the one of him walking up the steps at the Lincoln Monument. And then I also have a Catholics versus Convicts poster right here. And why don't we do a quick trivia game for both films, okay? And maybe what we'll do is you kind of have to raise your hand, or maybe you unmute and just yell out an answer. Okay. So get your trivia brains ready.
Or should we do it in the chat? Should we do it in the chat maybe?
I was just going to say, to save on shipping costs, I'm in Sherman Oaks. Is there a way I can just scoop both of those up?
Yeah, I'm in Los Feliz. We're right down the street.
I like that.
So, okay. I think we can just shout it out. That's
okay.
I don't want to give unfair advantage to people who are better typers than those of us who are not good typers. So why don't we start with we'll start with the Hesburgh poster. How many of you, quick show of hands, how many of you have had a chance to see the film? All right, great. Wow. Okay. So I'll do a Hesburgh movie trivia question. I'm going to ask the question. Just shout out the answer when you have it. Unmute yourself. Everyone's got to unmute. Okay. And I'll do my very best to be the referee, to be a fair referee. Is everyone on the call visible right now, Dan and Carrie?
Maria's not visible, or Tim.
Okay. Well, I'm going to do the best I can, okay?
There's Tim.
There's no instant replay in this competition, so I'm just letting you know. All right, so the question is, unmute yourself if you want to compete, because I'm going to give the poster I'll sign the poster and send it to whoever I hear the answer from first.
Megan, you're cheating.
Okay, here goes. Ready?
Ready.
By the way, if you shout out the wrong answer, you have to drop and give me 10 push-ups in front of Taylor Hall next time you're on campus. Okay. In what year did Father Ted become chairman of the Civil Rights Commission?
Oh,
1957.
68.
1964.
54.
63.
65.
I have no idea.
None of you saw the movie, did you?
I know the answer. I know the answer, but I'm recusing myself.
The year was 1969. Okay.
Cool.
He joined.
Oh, the chair. Oh, that's a trick question.
That's a little tricky.
That's a trick question.
So he was asked to be one of the original members in 57. And then in 69, he wrote to President Nixon, who had just become president, and said, I would like to step down. It's been 12 years. I've had a great time. I got to go back to my day job. And President Nixon said, I'm not only am I not going to let you leave, I want you to be chairman. So that was 69. All right, I'll come up with another one.
This has now become a drama, right? Instead of a documentary.
What is the name of the airplane Father Ted flew on? Thanks to Jimmy Carter.
Air Force One.
No.
It was Blue Angel.
Blackbird.
Oh, who said that?
I heard it.
Kevin Hayes.
What did you say, Kevin?
Blackbird.
I will accept Blackbird. I will accept that because that is the name of it, but it's also known as the SR-71. It was the fastest. So we have a winner, Kevin.
Kevin Hayes. Kevin Hayes, the winner.
SR-71 was the fastest airplane on Earth at the time. And Father Ted not only went up in the plane and flew with the pilot, for a short period of time, for about 2 minutes, they went faster than that plane had ever gone before. Father Ted said to him, I want you to really put up, I really want you to hit the gas on this. And they literally broke a record in the air together. It was an unofficial record because it wasn't being like monitored by Guinness, but Father Ted, man, he he'd like to squeeze the most out of every day, and he did that day. So Kevin, I'm going to owe you a poster. Kevin, you're gonna connect with Dan or Carrie and just let them know. I just need your address and what you want me to say on the signing. Okay, sure. Now, how about a Catholics versus Convicts poster? How many of you have seen that film? A couple of you. Okay, sounds good. How many people played in that game? Anybody? Reggie, I know it was just before your time.
Marching band.
Be off now. Okay.
Marching band.
Marching band. Oh my God, that's fantastic. What did you play?
That's awesome.
Clarinet.
Clarinet. Okay. This is a fairly easy question, I think. Okay. And there are two possible correct answers. For the Notre Dame Miami game, which took place on October 15th of 1988, it was the number 1 team, Miami, versus the number 4 team in the country, Notre Dame. The winning answer is name one of the two, you don't have to name them both, name one of the two announcers who announced the game for CBS Sports.
Brent Musburger.
Yes, we have a winner. Who was that?
Right here.
Is that Dan?
Phil? No, Phil.
Phil.
It's one of the best 30 for 30s. Not to toot your horn, but it was one of the best ones. Yeah.
Awesome. So Phil, did you get that? Was that your answer?
That's Phil.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
We have a winner.
Who was the other one?
The other one was Pat Hayden.
Oh, right.
Who was he played it. Did he play at USC?
He played at USC. He's quarterback.
And then he played in the pros, and then he was the announcer. He announced the Notre Dame game for years, and then he became the athletic director at USC, and he was a Rhodes Scholar as well. All right, that was fun. That was really cool.
Yep.
All right, I'm sorry I have to jump off. It was really nice meeting you all. And
thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Andre, congratulations on your new position. That's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. And Phil, will you maybe either Dan can
Yep.
put us in contact or you can connect with them? And all I need is your address, and maybe if you want me to say something in particular on the poster, I'd be happy to do it. And
I'll make the connection.
And I'll drop those. They'll be in a tube, and I'll send them out within the next few days. I don't get out a whole lot these days. I know a lot of us don't. But as soon as I get down to the mail, to the post office, I will drop a poster off to Kevin and to Phil.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick.
Right. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much. Let's go out.
That was great. That was great.
Thanks for hosting this.
All right. Thank you.